Friday of last week.
Of their old house.
Well, then that's new information to me.
All right, that's
good news.
Yeah, we'll take good news.
Well, maybe they ain't paid for it yet. They just moved in.
Well,
Technically, I wrote that report on Thursday, so it was accurate at that time.
well, don't get ahead of the ball game.
I think they closed Friday.
Okay.
Well, that's good news.
This last Friday they closed? I thought they were in Arizona already. No, they closed on Friday and left on Saturday.
Was that during Dave?
Thank you, Dave.
let's buy a new place and leave.
Yep. Well, they had to come home just to pick out fixtures and covers, I guess.
For the winter. I mean, I am smart and I like to have more.
Russell. I mean, we're in the process of we have to get it all approved through Sanford.
Stupid wrestling, this
But
darn little wrestling.
there's a few other things that we have to do, but
Why? Because I hate the cold. Yeah.
Belton.
Evidently Dave said it's time.
Oh, it is time.
They asked me to be there on basis.
Oh, I see.
Well, call to order the regular meeting for the Tracy City Council for Monday, February 14th. The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No invitation, but happy Valentine's Day. How's that?
Do you have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mayor, we do. After the agenda went out on Friday, I got an email from Kyle Renicky at ISG, our engineer, and he asked me to put some information, or an additional item on the agenda 6, which is the approve the plans and specs for the pond decommissioning project, which is something we've been waiting for, and so we want to add it to make sure that we're timely on that project. And so we'll have item 6, resolution 2022-21 that we added.
Okay.
We have not went to bid yet.
No, we've not. This would authorize it going to bid. Our plan would be to advertise it next week.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
First and second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anybody here from the public that would like to talk about something that is not on the agenda?
Are we on the agenda or not? I don't know where I'm at.
It's on the agenda, yes.
Cool.
You made the agenda. Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the January 24th minutes, approve the municipal accounts payable without breakthrough beverage, approve the January 13th park board minutes, and approval of the January 19th CTWG minutes.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Renjay.
Yes.
Schmidt.
Yes.
Koopman.
Yes.
Cheek.
Aye.
Tell.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to approve the accounts payable for breakthrough beverage.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Koopman.
Aye.
Tell.
Aye.
Renjay.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Yes.
Mayor Corman.
Aye. Does anybody have anything for Mayor Council Communication today?
Mayor, I just wanted to say that the park committee of which I work on met again on Friday, and we continue to work with ISG and trying to refine a master plan for Central Park. And ultimately, the hope is to have a long-term plan to present to the council to consider, and that this plan will be something that will enhance our chances of getting a grant for the playground equipment and possibly the band shell, two big items in the park.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Just because I read this in the paper the other night. So they're proposing that the concrete for that is going to be that much?
Okay, there are some estimates for concrete, and we talked about that last week, about how we can reduce that cost by having, in some areas, narrower pathways, and in some secondary areas, not having any sidewalks at all. But those were very preliminary figures, and committee members are very cognizant about costs, and one possibility for reducing concrete costs, if there are new sidewalks put in, is to have some of the city public works department possibly be able to do some of that work on our own as in-kind
Right.
services.
Right now, this is just like a big picture so that we can try for grants, and if we would get grants that would cover, let's just say sidewalks, for some God-forsaken reason, I don't know why they would, but, they would cover that, then we would have that, and maybe we would go with more sidewalks than what we would do if we were paying for it on our own.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's
so
correct.
it's,
My question is, if we get 100% grants, I understand it, but if we only get, say, a 50-50 matching grant, where does that money come from?
we can
for
use
cash grab.
labor, we can use labor as
Yeah.
our 50%.
So who does their job when they're doing that?
Well, it's kind of like when they worked on the liquor store, they would do it on their downtime, try to figure it in, like if they would do it in the summer, to utilize more of your summer help to do more of the mowing versus the city guys, and I guess, I'm just throwing out a guess, that's where
Can I
Shane
answer
would be
that?
the one.
Do you mind, Mayor, if I answer that question directly? I'll just give you a hypothetical. Let's say we have a $150,000 project. It's cost $150,000 to do. And we wanted to go to a Department of Natural Resources grant, which is a 50-50 deal. So they put up 50 and we put up 50. If we have $75,000 that we have to put up for a match, let's say we have half of that in cash and half of that in kind. We can use that as our 50% match, and then the DNR will give us $75,000 in cash. So we really only put up $37,500 in cash, $37,500 in labor, and $75,000 in cash from the state. That's how that would work in that particular context. Each grant is a little bit different, but with the DNR grant, which is what we're going to apply for in March, you have $41,000 in cash currently, specifically, and then we'll have more money in terms of an in-kind, piece, and then we'll use that to get, a certain amount of money from DNR. We're trying to figure out what that is, but the short answer is that any money that we provide for a match would have to come from the city, whether it be in-kind or cash or whatever.
Well, that's the reason it's bringing me up to
Yep.
ask this. I'm not
But we
in
have-
favor of it. I'm in favor of it, but
Yeah.
we're told all the time, we have no money, we have no money. If we spend money here, we got to cut here.
Right, but
And all of a sudden, we're coming up with, say, $37,000 that I didn't know we had.
Well, it's in your 2022 budget that you've adopted for $41,000 as a match for this project.
That
So,
part I understand.
yeah, the rest of it we don't have. The rest of it will have to compete as a capital project against any of your other options. Whether it be equipment or roads or whatever. You'll have to have that discussion in future years as to whether do we want to spend money on this park or do we want to spend money on something else. That'll be a question for you in the future. This year we have some money set aside to do this grant. That doesn't mean it will not remotely cover the entire plan for Central Park, but it'll be a start.
We're looking at possible phasing.
Yep.
Right.
It'll be
Over
phased.
For everybody out there listening, I'm not against this. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I guess the part I'm against is the city group becoming contractors. I don't think we should get into that. Honestly, you're opening up a can of worms when you do this, folks. Because if we
But
have
we're
other,
not doing
if
it
we have
right
other
now.
projects, we have other projects, and they come and say, hey, can the city crew help us here?
Yeah. Well, George and Ron, well, the council will have a good opportunity to discuss it in depth once we get that proposal. But the way I look at it, this is a plan that's going to enhance our chances, a long-range plan to enhance our chances of qualifying for that playground grant that we applied for, the playground equipment grant that we applied for last year and we didn't get, in part because we didn't really have a plan in place.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
so I just wanted to let everyone know that the park committee is working on it.
Doing an excellent
Okay.
job the way it looks too.
Mhm.
We have a nice plan laid out.
We'll try. Thank you, George.
So I guess I'm next on the city administrator report. I printed out a copy of the packet came out portrait instead of landscape, so you've got a full, piece in front of you. But I just want to go over a few things. The first thing that I have is, and do you mind, Diane, hand it out to the other side. So Thursday, we have scheduled from the last discussion a community center work group meeting. Could you pass this down?
Okay.
We've got a proposed agenda. Per our previous practices, I'd like to have the city council review this and make sure that it's, that it's good and kind of approve it, essentially. But it has two parts. There's an open forum, which we did the last time, but you might recall that Ken Witt had kind of a proposal that he wanted to make, and so I talked to him earlier today, and I wanted to make sure that he was going to be prepared for that. He sent out an email assuring us that he would be prepared for that, and so with that, that's what you have on this particular agenda, plus an open forum so you can discuss, whatever you want ultimately on that. So if you're okay with that agenda, just would like a motion to approve it so that we can get it posted.
Is it Thursday or
Thursday.
Wednesday? It was the 16th. So you changed it to Thursday?
I could have sworn that it was Thursday the 17th. We've been back and forth on this.
I guess I remember it as the 16th,
My
but
calendar as a 16th.
I had mine on the 16th.
Okay.
I think it was listed as a tentative meeting.
If we want to do it on the 16th on Wednesday, I'm fine with that. I just was going by what I was told.
yeah.
So if it's the
It was the 17th.
If it's the 16th, I have no problem with that. I didn't change anything.
Well, when do we want to have it?
I can't make it Wednesday.
Me either.
But it's not the end of the world.
Can you make it on
Ken
Thursday?
was, when you visited with him, he's prepared for the Thursday then?
I'm not sure now that I think about it, to be honest. There's been some, I think that you could decide if you want to do it on Wednesday or Thursday. But I guess there was some
Well, we have
confusion
to
on my
have
part.
the meeting posted, don't we? And if we post this tomorrow, it's not enough time, correct?
72 hours.
Technically, if we post it
So we
now,
have to go with this, and then we could probably just verify with the rest of the committee that it would work. Otherwise, we bump it back a week, and
Mine's not.
Dave, what day works for you?
I can do Thursday. George is gone, though, for a couple, so.
I'm gone all week
Oh, all right,
after today.
Thursday's fine with me, Seth.
okay. Well, if we can save Dave on Thursday, I'd suggest Thursday, if it's okay with the
Be good to save Dave.
rest of the.
Save Dave.
Do we need a motion on that?
yeah, we can just get a motion to approve that.
I'll
That'd be
make the
great.
motion that we meet on Thursday, February 17th in the library basement at 5:30. Our work,
So do we need to check with because the tentative meeting was sent out for the 16th.
That's my fault then.
And
I
that's
told him
not a
the
problem.
17th.
I just want to make sure the other committee members, we can
works.
say,
Changing it.
We can, I'll second that, because we can approve this and then check with them, and if it doesn't work, we just move it to the next week, would be my suggestion, to the next Wednesday.
I'm okay with that too. I mean, it's certainly whatever you guys want to do. I would suggest then if you want to do it that way, that the motion be that we'd like to hold the meeting on the 17th, and if it's not going to work, then move it to the following week.
Move it to the 23rd.
Is it Thursday?
That's what you said, right?
Yes.
That's what he said, because I'm
Won't be
seconding
back
it.
yet then. Not till Thursday.
You'd still be gone either meeting?
I'll be back the day after that, but it doesn't matter. I'm sure I'll hear what went on.
Eric, will you get a hold of committee members then on this? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
First
so
and
do we
second.
have did we have
I
a
think
first
we
and
have a
second?
motion and a
I
second.
seconded.
Okay, any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Morandite,
Aye.
Whitman,
Yes.
Chow, Jones,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Teagues,
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
You catch me off guard, Diane, having me go first.
The next item is something I want to make you aware of generally, and it's just something that I found out literally today. So you might remember that we had, when we issued the bonds for the street project in 2019, we issued a temporary bond. And that temporary bond is then due to be replaced by a long-term bond from rural development. But we needed the money up front in order to pay for the project, because we didn't have just $9 million in cash sitting around. It's actually $8.4 million in cash. And so what I got an email from Ehlers today basically saying, hey, we need to reissue that temporary bond again. I'm like, what are you talking about? The project isn't done yet. Well, it turns out you can only, according to state law in Minnesota, issue a temporary bond for 3 years. And I asked Shane about it. He wasn't aware of it. Krista obviously wasn't aware of it. It happened all before we got here. But essentially what it means is that because the project isn't complete, we have to issue another temporary bond to refund the previous one. Because state law only allows you to do it for 3 years.
What does that cost us?
It's going to cost us $90,000, which is why I'm telling you. We're stuck. There literally is no other way to do it. It would have been really smart at the time to try to time the project so that it got done at the same time, but for whatever reason that didn't happen. I don't know yet how we're going to pay for this. It probably will come out of the project itself, and which we don't know what the impact of that is yet, because we don't know what the bids on the ponds part of it, and then we'll have to bid Center Street, and so we're trying to figure this all out in terms of making sure we have enough money for it. But I didn't want to surprise you, and I want to make you aware of it, which is why I'm telling you now. It's not a good piece of information, but we will figure out how to make it work.
So are we on schedule to be done before the next 3 years is out?
Yes. So I was going to mention that a little bit later when we talk about this anyway, but I don't mind mentioning it right now. So we had a conversation with Kyle this morning. Shane and I did. And ultimately what's happened is that rural development has been really, really slow. And in fact, they've had a change in personnel. The person that had been working with us had stopped working with us. Then we got a new person in the last year, and now that new person is going away, and we're going to go back to working with the old person, which is good, because they basically have told us we need to know what this pond decommissioning is going to cost before we can officially authorize Center Street. It's like they won't do two things at one time. They have to do it kind of consecutively in a linear fashion, and so. But what I told Kyle this morning is that my expectation, and they should be working on design for Center Street right now. My expectation is that Center Street is going to get bid in April, with construction starting in the summer of 2023, so that we can finish this project in the spring of 2022 this year, so that we can finish the project in time to meet rural development's deadline, which is June of 2023. So we've got to start the project this year in order to make that happen. Because if we wait to bid this project, till later in the year or next year, it's going to cost us a whole bunch more money because everything is going up these days, right? So we don't want to do that. So we're pushing really hard to make that happen. We've been slowed down by rural development ultimately, but now that some personnel changes, and they finally approved the pond, which is why you're seeing that a little bit later in the agenda tonight. We're gonna push that through. But the short answer is yes. The entire project is slated to be done by the end of June of 2023, and so that will be when.
It entails what? The ponds, Center Street.
And the project that's being completed right now. Yes.
That's supposed to be done this
Yes. By
20.
It all should mostly be done by 2022, but officially the final acceptance won't be until the spring of 2023. In all likelihood, it'll bleed over in terms of accepting the final project to, at that time, even though the bulk of the construction or all of it will be done during this summer. But we have until the end of June. We have until June 2023 actually to complete the project. That's when we can get the permanent rural development bond, and at that point we'll refund those temporary bonds that we have to refund. We'll have to refund them twice. We're going to have to do it here in May and then refund them again next year. The caveat to that, council member, that you should know is that if construction costs get out of control and our bids come back really, really high on the ponds, or they come back really, really high on Center Street, and we don't have enough money to complete the project, then we'll have to decide, do we want to downsize the project? Do we want to do a piece of it but not all of it? Do we want to try to find some additional money to put into it from some other source? But until we know what the official bids are, we won't know for sure. But yes, the plan is to complete that. I don't want you to think that that's 100% because, sometimes things happen, But the engineer's estimates show us that it will get done.
So we're redoing it now here in 2022.
Yes.
So we should have for the 3 years till 2025.
Yeah, we should have plenty of time.
Okay.
Yes, is the short answer. I think you asked me a simpler question and I gave you a long-winded answer.
Yeah, and then you got me questioning if I was.
Well, I should have just kept my mouth shut, Ali, is what I should have done, and just answered the question. But yes, we should have time.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
When you say that the whole project, we're not including past 7th Street anymore, right?
No, we're not. That'll be in a future phase.
Okay.
Yep. That was what originally was called Phase 4, I believe, 3A4, and it'll be done at a future point, but it won't be done as part of this project, unless some other money drops out of the sky.
About how many more miles or blocks are we, after we're done with what you're just talking about, is on the plan to go on at a future time?
So we'll, Shane, do you have the answer to that question? How, after we complete Center Street and 3A2, how much is left to do as part of, all the way through 3B?
As far as blocks on 3B, from what I understand, say it's been a while since I looked at the official map, but it's very similar to what 3A was, which was, I think we did 15 blocks and then 21 blocks, and then I think Center Street's another 8, so it's going to be close to 40.
40 more blocks in that phase. And then we're
But
about
did you
done?
include Center Street in that?
That's part of this round.
But those blocks wouldn't be in aren't you asking after?
After we're done with what we
What
just
we're
talked
not
about.
doing right now, Phase 4.
Yeah, that would be,
Blocks.
that's considered what we were tentatively calling 3B right now.
Oh,
And that's probably, we don't have funding for that or a plan for that. We're looking at something like 2028, maybe, or something like that. We start to ponder something like that. We're a ways out yet from that.
And that would be 40 blocks.
Yeah, give or take 40 blocks is kind of what the proposal was before, so. But it's all going to be contingent on funding.
And our ability to repay the debt.
Yep.
Well, by the time we
That's
get
the
there,
issue.
we should be backing down out of some of this.
We are. We'll start backing down in 2026.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll get a little easier. I think the question is, how do you phase it? When can you do it? I think we'll have a better sense of that in a couple of years. But we've got time to figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
I think it was 17 that broke ground on the 3A project, so, and that included the pond, so, and we're just finishing that in 23, so it could be another long duration project.
Yeah, it's probably a long-term project.
So, Eric, to summarize, Ehlers has absolutely no other magic solutions to suggest that we try.
Yeah, I asked him that question specifically, and I gave him a couple of different options. I said, well, can we make a payment? Can we push it off? You know, what can we do? And the answer was, this is the only solution. Because ultimately the people, when we sold those bonds, they were intended to be a 3-year temporary bond, and they were expecting that to be refunded, you know, in that period of time, the people who bought the bonds.
Right.
And so we have to refund them at this point, which I certainly none of us understood, and it all happened before we all got here anyway. And so something happened when we did that. The right hand and the left hand between construction and the bond cost didn't communicate. So it's definitely $90,000 we did not anticipate, but we'll have to figure out how it fits in the project.
Could we point any of this to our engineers, that they didn't have this organized for us?
I'll be honest with you, we previously relied too much on the engineers for the financial information. Just because you're an engineer doesn't mean you're an accountant. You know what I'm saying? And so an engineer, what they're going to do is they're going to engineer. You know, I mean, that's what they do. You know, if you're hammered, you're going to see nails. And so from their perspective, they're trying to get the project done. And so it's really up to us to kind of manage the financial piece, which is why we came back to you with this revised schedule anyway. It's because we were seeing that the numbers were not going to work out to complete everything that we wanted to complete. So I think it's counterproductive to say whose fault it was anyway, you know, because at this point we just got to figure out how to move forward and fix it. But I would say, from my perspective, when you move into 3B and the next part of this project, you got to ask the question, how are we going to fund it? When is that funding coming in? How much is it going to cost? How are we going to pay back the debt in the first place? You know, before you actually issue the bonds. And that would be my advice to you as a council. And some of you may not be here, you know, in 4 or 5 years when this discussion is happening. But those would be the questions that I would ask at that time. So, but we're figuring it out. The good news is that we're not blind. You know, that's why we have the financial software that we have. That's why we have Krista, you know, and is that we're keeping an eye on it. And so, and we can afford it. It's just a tough pill to swallow to have to pay extra money, but that's what it is. It's a terrible pill. So that's our update on the street project.
Thank you.
I want to tell you that we do this every year, but the Board of Equalization, the local Board of Appeals meeting is going to be on April 18th at 7 p.m. You are the local Board of Equalization, but just to remind you that that'll be a day where we'll be here. I want to bring up an issue, something that I've been working on a little bit in the last couple weeks, and that's related to franchise agreements. You may remember we've had some franchise agreements discussion during the previous budget cycle. Our franchise agreement with Excel expires at the end of this year. We've had some preliminary discussions with them. I've got kind of a draft franchise agreement with them. In addition to that, I've been reviewing our cable franchise agreements as well. And our one from Minnesota Energy expires in a couple of years. And so ultimately, what I plan to do is bring back a discussion to you to talk about franchise agreements, because in part it's about collecting fees on that. You know, we want to make sure we get it right. The cable franchise agreement is also complicated too, because we keep extending the one from Charter at the end of the year. I don't believe we actually have to do that anymore. because I was trying to figure out why are we doing this, extending the same agreement. And without going into too much detail, I believe that there's a solution to this problem, so we can give them like a 10-year agreement plus. So I actually have an agreement from Charter as well that I potentially want to bring to you for a potential long-term extension. And so I think it's time to discuss this, because I mean, we have money that's coming in from these every year, and this is an opportunity to bring in some additional fees from those franchise agreements. So I just want to keep you posted on that. And the last thing I want to mention is that if anybody noticed, there's a few buildings downtown that are starting to get some Wi-Fi nodes. There's some white boxes, like one up above the library. There's one up above City Hall here. We don't have them all in yet because we don't have all the equipment, but this is part of the grant that we received from the federal government to bring internet access downtown. It isn't live yet, but you can see the network. It's called Downtown Tracy. So if anybody wonders why VAST was here and what they were doing, that was what was going on for the public. And I would imagine in the next few months, certainly by the time it warms up, you'll be able to access the internet for free downtown, which should be great during Boxcar Days, I think, in particular.
Eric, what is the area defined as downtown?
So generally speaking, it's going to be from about the bank down to South Street. So roll into South Street between 2nd and 4th, basically.
So it will include 4th Street?
Yes. In fact, there's one that's on the other side of this building, facing above the fold now, that'll broadcast that direction. So probably even go a little further than 4th Street, yeah. Yep. So we think that 8 access points will cover that area.
Okay.
So that would be what, a 4-block radius, something like that?
Good.
That's all I have, unless you have any questions about any project that's going on in the city or anything you'd like to discuss. Did you have something, council member? You looked
Well,
like
I
you
was
had a thought.
just pondering here. I've wondered how much pain it would cause us if we would open up the library basement to be used until we get a community center.
That's a good question. We discussed that. You might recall that was an option we looked at one time.
Mm-hmm. I didn't mean use it, but if somebody, I got compliments from a few people that said they live out in the country, they come to town to the library so they could use the internet. Well, maybe we need to, till we get a community center, whenever that is, we open up the basement for people to do stuff in if they need to, until we can finish what we're working on for as a community center. It just will pull the fees out of there. It's a public library, it's owned by the city. Could we make an amendment to whatever we did, or I'm just curious.
Are you suggesting that we move basically all the operations from the Eagles to the basement of the library?
No, I'm just suggesting if somebody wants to have a bone builder there, or a blood pressure clinic, or whatever, I'm sure it's not those things, but just something like that they could use it without the $20 fee or $30, $50 fee, whatever it is.
I don't think there's anything that precludes them from using it now. I think what your concern is about the $25 fee for the use of the
fee, yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, the community center's not bad.
That's up to you. My guess is that if we had a community center, we would probably bring back to you a fee schedule for that too. And that's a policy question for you. You could certainly give it away for free. Your policy in the past has been we charge fees for the use of these spaces, so that would be a departure. But you can certainly do that.
I don't know if anybody uses it now. I don't know if anybody's asked to use it.
It's a good question. I think it's a good discussion.
He's trying to read my mind. You can tell what I'm thinking, huh?
Well, you look like you were thinking about something. But I think it's worth a discussion. If you'd like to, discuss it, we could certainly bring it up at a future meeting.
Didn't you get contacted about somebody about like bone builders and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we're going to start doing bone builders as part of a city program here at the VMC, which seems like a good space for it during the day because we're not, other than walkers, we're not using the space a lot. And so we talked to, and they actually have quite a bit of programming. So we talked to the folks that kind of put this program together under monies from Lyon County. They don't work for Lyon County, but they are part of Lyon County. And they've been wanting to have a space to do the bone builders, but they have a bunch of other programs. And so we're going to talk to them about maybe doing some of those others as well. But I asked them when they thought they might start, and they thought maybe, as soon as the middle of March. But we're getting close to that. Yep.
I'm confused. What are they doing at the Methodist Church now? Is that the bone builders?
They used to do the bone builders.
No, I mean, last week I seen.
My understanding is they approached us and asked us if there was a space because they were looking at moving out of the Methodist Church.
Okay.
That's my understanding. And so my understanding is that they weren't doing it at the Methodist Church currently, or they were looking to move. Either way, but we were approached by them, and so we talked to them about, what kind of space you could potentially use, and I wanted to make sure that it was part of an overall program and not just bone builders, because there's a lot more to it than this. They do nutrition programs. They do people that help with how do you stop from falling. Basically a lot of senior-oriented kinds of programming, health and wellness kinds of things, which I think would be really good for the community as a whole.
Yeah.
So our intent is to try to expand it. They need volunteers to help run those programs, however, because that's kind of the way that it works. Is they get a volunteer that teaches a particular thing. They train them how to do it, and then that volunteer then teaches, whatever the program is that they're doing. But
so the ones that are doing it or were doing it at the Methodist Church are the ones that approached.
Yeah, Jade Morris is her name actually, from the county, and she called me and said, hey, would you we're looking for this space, we're looking to do this kind of stuff, what can you help us with? And so we offered up the VMC. They liked that idea, and that's what the plan.
But is she the one doing it at the Methodist Church?
No, she's not. I think Jan Viso had been doing it, but Jan Viso is the volunteer that does the program, but it's through this other organization that ACE that works through Lyon County.
So Jan's not doing it now, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, I guess I'm confused because I swore that she was there last week at the Methodist Church.
I'm just telling you what I think I know.
I don't know either.
I could be wrong. That's my understanding how this works. So we're just trying to provide more programming for seniors. Heard that a lot.
Just so we include people that are presently involved in it, so they don't feel like we're pushing them out or.
This is all the same people, is my understanding.
Okay.
So that's all I got, and then what we do have a financial report from Krista. She's next.
Can I plug in quick?
Oh yeah.
So I am just going to give a pretty brief report for the 2021 unaudited financial statements. Later, when the audit is complete, we'll go through a more in-depth report, so I wanted to keep this one kind of high level, pretty brief. We ended the year in the general fund ahead of our budget by about $45,000. So the general fund includes our debt service and capital outlay, as well as our admin and finance, police, fire, public works, multi-purpose center, pool, library, a lot of that activity within the city. So really positive as far as I'm concerned, being that far ahead of a budget for the year. A lot of that has to do with our new software. Transitioning to Cassell has really allowed us to track our expenses better, be more aware of what's going on within the city and those activities. We also involved the department heads a lot more in the financial statements this year. They were a lot more aware of monitoring their budgets, where they were at, asking those questions. And I think developing that relationship and that transparency with the department heads has helped as well. So this next slide just looks at total revenues across the city compared to budget. We were under about $550,000 from where we were budgeted. Basically, all of that is due to spending less in the Phase 3A2 project than what was budgeted this year. That's where that difference in revenue comes from. Charges for services, you'll see, was over almost $300,000 above budget for revenues, and all of that was due to our increase in driver's license and motor vehicle business during the year, above budget. So really right on track there, nothing out of the ordinary, above and beyond what we were expecting. Personnel services were about $80,000 below budget for 2021. Most of that was due to vacancies, and then in public works we had some savings and some seasonal and standby wages for the year as well. And then apparently the council is the only one that went over budget. But mainly due to the work sessions that you guys had during 2021. We met a lot more with budget planning and the community center work group, things like that. So not a big deal there, very minimal dollar amount wise. Supplies. The overage in supplies is due to the licensing business being up. So with the revenues being up, the amount that we had to submit to the state that we collect on behalf of the state also increases with that same amount. So that is where our supplies are over for the year. And then community development, which includes the pool, was a little bit high, about $15,000, and that was due to some extra maintenance that we had to do at the pool after it had been closed for 2 years. Services and charges. This budget in total was over as well. The biggest part was due to my error. I removed the airport master plan from the budget when we were doing different budget amendments to the airport throughout the year. That fund is tricky with all the moving parts that we had in 2021, so that was an error on my part. Finance and administration was over about $20,000, and that is due to an increase in insurance above what we budgeted. And then community development was down that $37,000. That community development includes EDA and the Small Cities Development Grant. We didn't issue as many loans to residents as we had anticipated in the budget, so that's why that's down as well. And then the last slide I have is just a look at cash balances by fund. So we used $4.2 million in cash in 2021, which is all just Phase 3A2 cash that we had on hand to spend on that project. Now, when you look at these cash balances, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're available to spend. Some of them are restricted. For example, the community center, we have that $160,000+ that is restricted for the community center, which is sitting in our capital projects fund. So you'll see we have a cash balance of $265,000, but over half of that is reserved or restricted right now. But just a good slide to kind of show cash, our cash position right And that is really all I have. I wanted to keep it really brief and high level until the audit's complete and we do a little bit, well, a lot more in-depth reporting through the audit. Any questions for me?
The money that we're receiving, because they didn't get the project done like they were supposed to, that $70 that we're assessing every day, does that go into which balance then?
You're talking about the
Liquidated damages?
The damages,
Settlement?
liquidated damages. It'll go back into the project itself.
Oh, just go right back? into
Yeah,
the project.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, it'll be revenue in the project.
Help offset that $90,000.
It'll offset that $90,000. Yeah.
Krista, do you feel like, judging from the fund balances of the water fund, or water and sewer utilities, that our rate increases that we implemented are doing what they're supposed to be doing? You feel comfortable with where we're at?
Yeah, so this is strictly cash balance. Our fund balance, which takes into consideration assets and liabilities, the difference between assets and liabilities, and then our net position throughout the year. As far as water, sewer, they all look good. They were where we were expecting everything to fall into place for 2021.
But
So
it's enough
doing-
to cover what we need to
Yep.
cover.
Yep.
Those cash balances are going down. It's kind of confusing because this year we're doing it correctly right now in that the project costs for the street projects, some of them come out of the ineligibles, which is your streets and the not the street, a portion of the street, sidewalk, curb and gutter, things like that. The rest of it is coming out of the storm sewer fund, the storm water fund, or the sanitary sewer fund and the water fund. We used to kind of have a project fund, but in reality, they should be coming out of that. So when you see those cash balances go down, that's money that we had already gotten from the bonds that went into those funds that's coming out of those funds now to pay for the street project. So money from the bonds go into the funds, and then they come out of the funds to pay for the street project. So that's why you're seeing those balances go down. That's all part of this project. Any big numbers you see like that are part of that project. And one other clarification too on the revenues, Krista had said that the revenues weren't as high because we didn't spend as much. Kind of the way it works is that we submit a pay app, which you eventually vote on and approve. We send a pay app to a rural development, and then they send us money based on that pay app. So sometimes the money comes through in the form of and when I say they send us money on the grants. So the less money we spend, the less money we get back in grants, because we have to fund all of the costs up front. So when we spend less money on the street project, we get less money back in grants. So that's why that revenue is down. It's really kind of, a one-for-one thing, if that makes sense. So as you know, they're behind on the street project. And so that's why we didn't get as much revenue and also as much as expense this year on that, because they're a little bit behind in terms of where they should be. But they'll complete the project on time next year.
And Chris, on your first slide where you're listing the change in fund balance for the, we had a negative variance on general taxes and special assessments. Is that in part due to some people some unpaid special assessments or unpaid property taxes?
Yes, that is part of it as well.
Is that any to a level that you consider alarming?
In my opinion, no, I wasn't alarmed by that. Any other questions for me tonight? Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Krista.
So, new business, you ready for that, Mayor?
Yes, we are.
First item is the approval of the 2022 ambulance contract. This is basically what we discussed at the last meeting, is $25,000 for 1 year. This is exactly the same agreement that we signed 6 years ago, except that it clarifies exactly what financial information you're going to get. It refers to the report specifically, as well as the spreadsheet that Jerry had mentioned, which is part of the motion, and so that's in this agreement. We received this agreement from the ambulance earlier this week, and basically that's the information that's in your packet. I know Steve is here. I don't know if he wants to comment on it or not, but that's all the information we have on this.
Steve, Jeff, it don't matter.
Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I get called out all the
Sorry,
time.
sorry, Jeff.
You don't look like him.
Thank you.
Steve Meyer's a different person than Jeff Meyer.
Yes.
Sorry.
And
That's the Eagles guy, and for
and
some
not
reason,
related.
well, I get
Not
the two of you
related.
confused in my head.
Yeah, not related either.
I know.
It's
Sorry
fine.
about that.
Steve's fine. We're a quarter mile apart.
I was gonna say, yeah, you're stone's throw apart from each other.
And both of our wives are named Carrie.
Probably getting a stone thrown at you.
Just to make it more confusing.
Oh, yeah.
So you think the ambulance
if you could
can,
come up here.
the ambulance can
absolutely.
meet those requirements that was
Yes,
asked?
yes, absolutely. We brought 2 copies of that in. It is our intention that, yes, if you accept this contract this evening, it'll be signed tomorrow. Our director will stop by and sign it, they'll notarize it, whatever else. That's our effective for 2022 contract.
I'm talking
So.
the terms,
Yes,
of the financial stuff that you.
that'll work. The percentage on it, ideally, the percentage will stay the same. So if we go up for the townships, I mean, we won't this year, but I mean, if we go up in the future, then it will go up for the city. But you'll have more than ample notice of that because you'll get the contract in March, April, whatever, after our stuff. So you guys will have that way before your budget, which is, I'm assuming, August, September, whenever you guys do budget for the city. So,
Sounds good.
so like I say, that should reflect everything in that copy, so.
I'll make that a motion then.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Jones,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Tao, Teagues,
Aye.
Koopman,
Yes.
Landry,
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
Okay. And the Tracy Ambulance thanks you. Like I say, you guys have got 2 copies of the contract. Our director will be in tomorrow to sign it, so should not be a problem.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yep.
Jeff.
Thanks,
Thank,
Jeff.
thank you very much.
Mayor, the next 4 items are all financially related items, and so Chris is going to come up and talk about each one of those in turn.
So first one being the 2021 final budget amendment. All of these changes were reflected in the financial update that I just gave. Just to give a clear picture, the first section for adjusting the engineering budget, when the 2021 budget was created for the Phase 3A engineering, it was difficult to break out the exact portion that would be engineering versus capital outlay. So the budget was put into capital outlay. This is just breaking out those actual engineering costs and moving the budget for those costs to the correct line item. So the net effect on that first section, it ends up being 0. It's just moving dollars from one line item to another. The bottom piece for the property taxes for 2021 were not included in the original 2021 budget. This is just adding it to make that correction.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-17.
I'll second that.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Teagues,
Aye.
Landry,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Koopman,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
Okay, so the next item I have is a 2022 budget amendment already. This includes the $25,000 for the ambulance, which will be coming out of the hospital fund where we have the $60,000 remaining to use for health-related initiatives. We reduced some wages and personnel costs for the PD admin and custodian position that is open, that we at this time are not going to fill. Joshua has transitioned to spending part of his morning in the PD office, providing those same services that Janelle used to provide for the police department. He will continue to do that. As far as I know, everything's going well there. Him and Peggy are both doing some additional training to really learn the systems that the police department uses. They'll also spend some time with Lyon County to learn their processes and expectations, things that they need to handle from the police department side of things. So Peggy will act as a backup for the position, just so that we make sure we have that coverage in case people are out or somebody wins the lottery and wants to quit their job, whatever. So we are removing that portion of Janelle's wages from the 2022 budget. There is a reduction in the federal grants revenue. I realized that I duplicated the ARPA funds in error. I had them in the general fund and then also the capital fund, so I had to take that out of the general fund. That was a mistake on my part. We also missed budgeting for the elections for 2021 later this year, so we increased the expense budget for that amount as well. And then the VAST budget, so our contract with VAST for our phone and internet lines was up at the end of this month or next month. I don't remember the exact date. So we took some time and looked at each line that we currently were being billed for and assessed whether or not we really needed those lines. So we were able to remove a handful of phone lines. We made some changes to our fax machines. We're going to be receiving e-fax now instead of traditional fax through the machine, which cut that cost down by about half per month. We are consolidating some internet service. We had 2 internet services in this building, which was not necessary. So we consolidated that into one. In the end, the changes that we made will save us about $8,000 for the year. So that is reflected in this budget amendment. And then I also included an increase in our IT software and services of about $3,700 to upgrade from Microsoft 2010 to Office 365. We've been talking about it for the last year or so since I've been here. Office 365 just offers additional security features that Microsoft 2010 doesn't. And Microsoft actually doesn't support 2010 anymore anyway. So it was just time, given the savings that we saw with VAST, we thought it would be a good opportunity to upgrade at this time. So I'm adding that as well. Questions?
Do we have backups in place so that we won't run into that hacking or whatever they've been doing? I mean, are they set up so that it's a little bit harder for them to shut the city down?
I believe we work, what's that? That's not my strong suit, so Eric might be able to answer that better, exactly what we have set up.
The short answer is yes, we have firewalls and things like that. We actually did a security audit. We had Computers and Beyond come out about 6 months ago, and they were kind of evaluating, where we were at. They had a number of recommendations, which we haven't been able to implement yet, associated with some of those security features that would make it better for us. But we do have security firewalls and things like that so that people can't get through. Well, I wouldn't say they can't get through. Nothing's impossible. Obviously, they hack all kinds of things. But yes, we do have those securities in place, and it's something we're looking at. You have the $25,000 ambulance.
Yes.
Too, also on there.
Number 1 on the list.
Yes, as well. So that's coming out of the hospital fund. That's the other piece that's on there as well.
No other discussion. I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-8.
I'll second it.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Jones.
Aye.
Whitman.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Yes.
Van Dyke.
Aye.
Al?
Aye.
Teigs?
Aye.
Mayor Corman?
Aye.
Right. The next one on the list is to accept another donation for the community center. At the end of December, we received another $500 to restrict for the community center. That would bring the balance, the restricted balance, up to $164,500.
I'll make that a motion. Second.
First and second, any further discussion on that one?
Yes. I guess at one of our work sessions, Eric, you had said that we could not send checks into City Hall. You did not want to work with those. Now, on this here, it says restricted that can come into City Hall.
I did not say that.
Huh?
I did not say that. I said that they can bring them into City Hall. In fact, I even encouraged it, as a matter of fact. And I was here when we received one large donation, as a matter of fact. What this is doing is restricting that $500 so it can only be used for a potential community center. That's what this action is.
I think one of the clarifications was if they sent the check into the city, they were not going to get that tax form.
We're not going to give them a tax form, that's correct. But we can give them our, if they want, they can, there's a meaning that there's forms that go out saying this is a receipt for your donation. That doesn't mean you can't deduct it, because you just need to prove what the deduction is, and the check would be good enough for that, you know, and all you would need is say I donated to the city. I can tell you that in our research that donations to local governments are considered fully tax deductible under IRS regulations, and so there's no issue with that.
But we're still going to transition encouraging people once the foundation gets up and going and we have that special, I can't think of the term.
If they get the special fund for the community foundation, then you could do that. But currently they're not set up to accept donations for the community center, which is why we're kind of accepting them in the interim.
Yeah, but the ultimate goal is it'll go through the foundation.
Ultimate goal is it would be go through the foundation, yeah. I think there's some hoops to jump through yet to make that happen, but yeah.
Okay.
At that point, you'd have to decide, do you want to take this money and give it to that, or do you want to hang on to it, or I don't know. I mean, you'll have to decide that, but.
The little bit that I'm starting to remember of this, if it goes into this fund, the local board has to okay it, and then the Hutchison board or whatever has to okay it also. So if local board goes for it and the other one doesn't, then what happens?
My understanding is that's never happened in the history of Southwest Initiative
So
Foundation.
don't need to worry about it.
No, I mean, they wouldn't, if it was something illegal about it, I'm sure that they would stop it, but I can't imagine that would happen.
Okay. Good.
They have to approve it, though, ultimately, because technically it's their 501c3, and we're just kind of, piggybacking on that. But so it's more like a formality.
One other thing here, it said the restricted fund balance will increase to $164,500. We discussed that.
That's right.
We previously had $138,500.
Right.
It was more than that. ISP took $4,000 or $5,000 out of that.
That's
from
right.
the sale of the multi-purpose center. My question is, are you saying here that we sold the multi-purpose center for $138,000?
No, I never said that.
What's it say here? Am I missing it then?
We sold the multipurpose center for $53,000, and by resolution in December of 2020, the city council restricted money for this purpose. But it wasn't just money from the sale of the multipurpose center; it was additional fund balance as well.
Okay. Because I know we didn't get that kind of money from.
No, we got $53,000 is what we got for the building.
Any other further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Jones?
Aye.
Landeck?
Aye.
Teigs?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Sutton?
Yes.
Al? Mayor Corman?
Aye.
Okay, my final resolution for tonight. The League of Minnesota Cities recently suggested that cities adopt a resolution outlining how they plan to use the ARPA funds that we are receiving. So U.S. Treasury issued a final rule on the use of American Rescue Plan funding in early January. The final rule allows us to allocate our entire funding amount to the revenue loss provision, as one of the uses of this funding was for revenue loss during the pandemic. With this, initially they had said you had to complete this revenue loss calculation and could only allocate the portion of funds up to that revenue loss amount. Now they're saying we can allocate our entire $223,000 to revenue loss if we choose to.
And we don't have to prove we lost that much?
Correct. So this resolution is basically doing that. We are going to allocate our entire $223,000 to revenue loss. That allows us to use those funds for government purposes, basically. Right now, we have spent $14,500 of that on our new water meter reading system and the new Trimble. We have allocated $150 to the new SCADA system that Shayna's working on, and then the remaining amount, about $59,000, will go into the capital fund. Is the plan right now. But this particular resolution just is outlining that we plan to use those funds for revenue loss.
So it gives us maximum flexibility, really.
Correct. Yep.
I make a motion we approve this resolution.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Bootman,
Yes.
Teagues,
Aye.
Solid,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Lockhart,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
Last item, Mayor, is just the item that we added, which is to approve the plans and specs and advertising of bids for the ponds decommissioning project. If you have any questions for Shane, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but basically this just allows us to get it out there so that we can advertise and get bids in and find out how much it's going to cost.
Have we secured the land?
So we're going to need 350, 400 acres or so. Some of that's going to be from city property that we can use. I have a signed agreement from one farmer, and my understanding is that I have a verbal agreement from another farmer, so we're real close.
Good.
Yeah.
Have the engineers come up with an estimated cost?
Yeah, I think it was like 3.6 million. Does that ring a bell? That's the number that sticks in my head.
That's horrible high.
That's the engineer's estimate. We don't know what the actual cost is going to be.
Let's hope the bids come better than that.
Boy, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it sure is, isn't it?
Eric, how many acres was that, 400, did you say?
350 to 400, depending on, that's the estimate in terms of how much you have to spread it, how much you can spread it. It also depends on whether you have corn or beans on there too. You can spread it at different rates depending on the crop.
When's the close date for the bids? Do we have
It'll
that?
be 3 weeks. We were talking about that today. It'll roughly be 3 weeks from next Wednesday. So whatever, like that's the middle of March. Yeah, like March 16th, something like that. So you'll see that come then to City Council and that second meeting in March to approve the contract and the low bid for that project.
And then we're hoping to do it in September, October this fall. And
Yeah, they'll probably start sometime during the summer because they'd have to they'll probably pile up the materials. They can't spread it until after the harvest is done, but I think they'll start before that. That'll be up to the contractor though.
So once it's all spread, filled back in, it's done?
It's done.
So they're filling the holes in then, that's part of the.
Yeah, they had to fill the hole
all
in.
in one bid?
Yeah, all in one, yeah. Yeah, so you take the material out, move it somewhere else, fill the hole back in, kind of restore it back to, I don't know what you would, what it
Grasslands. We'll go
Grasslands.
with grasslands.
I don't know, whatever it was for. So yeah, it's hard to believe it's a multi-million-dollar deal, but it's a lot of it is, I mean, that's a lot of trips, a lot of fuel, a lot of labor costs, a lot of machine equipment costs.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-21 to approve the plans and specifications and ordering advertisement for bids.
Second.
We have a first and second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Teigs,
Aye.
Yes.
Van Dyke,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
You're here for the special meeting, I assume?
Closed meeting, yes.
Yeah, we just have 2 closed meetings next, and that's it.
So what you want to do is, they're separate closed meetings, so a motion to go into the closed meeting for attorney-client privilege regarding the proposed settlement, and then, once we're finished with that, then another motion to go into the employee evaluations.
I'll make